A series of bombings rock cities from New York to Miami. Embassies are attacked, businesses destroyed, and Cuban Americans gunned down by assassins within the US Cuban exile community. The terrorist group known as Omega-7 claims responsibility, striking fear into the hearts of citizens and law enforcement alike. In the late 1970s, the FBI had a working knowledge of anti-Castro terrorists operating in the United States, but then a new group appeared, more violent and aggressive than their predecessors. Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office, recalls the challenges they faced. All agents had to go on was a series of chilling phone calls, a mysterious voice, and the threat of more violence. FBI field offices from New York to Miami coordinated their efforts, determined to catch the vicious killers. New York City, June 6, 1976, a massive bomb detonates at the Cuban mission to the United Nations in uptown Manhattan. New York police and the FBI rush to investigate the explosion. Special Agent Larry Wack, living just 3 blocks from the mission, is on the scene in minutes. The devastation is unbelievable, but miraculously nobody is injured or hurt. Agent Wack examines the entrance of the mission. From the blast pattern, it looks like the bomb exploded directly in front of the door. He notices a security camera mounted overhead and asks a Cuban diplomat for permission to look at the videotape. The diplomat refuses, saying they'll review it themselves and get back to him. The next day, Wack is told there's nothing on the tape. It appears that the Cuban officials are keeping the videotaped evidence for their own intelligence, even if it cripples an FBI investigation. A news station provides the FBI with a tape-recorded phone call from a man who claims he belongs to an anti-Castro organization that bombed the Cuban mission Omega-7. The FBI has never heard of this group before. Northern New Jersey has become a safe haven for Cuban immigrants fleeing Fidel Castro's brutal regime. Nearly 100,000 Cuban immigrants call it home. FBI agents try to identify members of Omega-7, but getting information from the Cuban exile community proves to be one of the most difficult challenges they face. Even if community members know who the perpetrators are, they view them as heroes. Omega-7 strikes targets in New York City again and again. They bomb the Cuban mission twice more, and another bomb detonates at Lincoln Center, where an orchestra from Cuba had been performing. In each instance, a representative of Omega-7 calls local news stations to claim responsibility. FBI Special Agent Tom Menapace analyzes the recorded calls. All the tapes sound like the same person, with slight variations in tone. The caller always identifies himself as a member of Omega-7, pronouncing it distinctly as Omega rather than the more common Omega. His demeanor is calm and collected as he explains their actions and motivations. FBI agents in New York and Miami interviewed dozens of suspected anti-Castro terrorists, but none of the agents recognize this particular voice. They play copies of the tapes for prominent members of the community, trying to get a name for the caller. Even those deeply involved in the Cuban community are unable to identify him. Investigators also play the voice for informants they know of connections to various anti-Castro organizations, but no one has any idea who the voice belongs to. The bombings continue. In March 1979, Omega-7 bombs the offices of a Cuban businessman named Eulalio Negrin in northern New Jersey. Negrin is an activist who helps reunite Cuban refugees with their families in the United States. At the scene, the FBI finds no witnesses and little evidence. Investigators believe the bomb is only a warning, as a more powerful device would have been used if they meant to kill Negrin. For more than 3 years after the original Omega-7 attack, another bomb explodes at the Cuban mission to the UN. The same mysterious voice calls news stations and takes credit on behalf of Omega-7. A month later, the terrorist group abruptly changes its pattern. Eulalio Negrin and his 12-year-old son leave their home in New Jersey when 2 masked men attack. The businessman, who had been working to free political prisoners in Cuba, is gunned down in front of his son. FBI Special Agent Tom Menapace must interview the grief-stricken boy, who is in shock after witnessing his father's murder. Special Agent Larry Wack is stunned by the brutality of the killing, finding it tremendously cold and calculating. The murder of a man in front of his son violates the unwritten rules of their dangerous game. Union City police recover empty brass cartridges believed to be from the shooter's weapon. The FBI and police question area residents, conducting an intense neighborhood investigation. They finally find a witness who can describe the color, make, and model of the gunman's vehicle. At the New York FBI office, Special Agent Menapace listens to a news tape in which a voice proudly claims credit for Negrin's murder. The stakes are getting higher, evolving from property damage to taking lives. All Agent Menapace has to go on is a vague description of the killer's car. He begins the tedious process of checking vehicle registrations against their list of suspects. Months later, the Cuban mission is bombed again. The Soviet mission is also attacked for providing aid to Cuba. The blast seriously injures an NYPD officer. Yet again, the mysterious voice of Omega-7 takes credit for both bombings. In Miami, January 1980, Omega-7 destroys a small cigar factory, their third bombing in the city within a year. Special Agent George Kaczynski, a bomb tech with the FBI's Miami field office, investigates the scene. The pattern is familiar, and the damage is extensive, not just to the building but to the hand-rolled cigars being manufactured there. As in New York, a representative of Omega-7 calls a local news station to take credit for the bombings. FBI Special Agent Tom Walzer believes the terrorists are trying to intimidate the shop owner, who advocates for better relations with Cuba. The goal is to get the attention of the Cuban community, send a message to individuals and businesses that have dialogue with the Castro regime, and communicate with the island of Cuba itself. In Little Havana, a predominantly Cuban neighborhood in Miami, FBI agents and police continue to dig for clues. Despite their wealth of informants and connections to community leaders, the FBI comes up empty-handed. Agents compare tape recordings of the Miami bombings with those from New York, agreeing that it's the same person. As in New York, investigators play the tape for members of Miami's Cuban community, but no one seems to recognize the voice. On March 25, 1980, FBI agents respond to a report that a bomb has been placed on a limousine belonging to the Cuban ambassador to the United Nations. Through interviews, investigators piece together what happened. When the chauffeur got the limo ready to take the ambassador to an appointment, he bumped the car in front of him. Getting out to inspect the damage, he found a shoebox wrapped in grey duct tape under the vehicle. Suspicious and aware of the previous bombings, the chauffeur placed the box in a garbage can away from the mission and hurried inside to call the police. When the NYPD bomb squad arrives, the chauffeur shows them where he put the suspicious device, but the garbage can is now empty. The officers realize the Department of Sanitation has made its regularly scheduled pickup, and now the truck and the bomb could be anywhere in the city. The bomb squad catches up to the truck and questions the driver. At first, he denies finding anything unusual, but when told it might be a bomb, he reveals that he found what looked like a radio receiver in the trash and had planned to take it home. Inside the box is enough C4 explosive to potentially blow up a building. In the lab, an FBI bomb expert examines the device for fingerprints, hairs and fibers, but finds nothing. On September 11, 1980, Omega-7 claims another life in Queens, New York. The victim is an attaché of the Cuban mission to the United Nations, marking the first assassination of a UN official on US soil. The newly formed FBI-NYPD Joint Terrorism Task Force investigates, the first such task force in FBI history. In the fall of 1980, the FBI gets a break in the case when a former anti-Castro radical contacts Special Agent Larry Wack. Feeling that innocent people are dying, he decides to cooperate. The informant cannot identify the members of Omega-7, but he has heard rumors about a significant split in the group's hierarchy. Agent Wack believes that once the FBI has identified suspects, they can exploit this division by pitting one faction against the other. 3 months after the murder of the Cuban attaché, a bomb explodes in front of the Cuban consulate in Montreal. The New York FBI office wonders if Omega-7 members from the United States are responsible. According to immigration officials, shortly after the bomb exploded, a car entering the United States refused to stop for inspection. Border guards were unable to get the license plate number as the car was going too fast, but they did get a description of the vehicle. A short time later, a New York state trooper stopped a car matching that description. Without a license plate number or other evidence of guilt, the officer was forced to let them go, but not before writing down information from their driver's licenses. The two men are identified as Enrique Airbons and Antonio Casavares. The task force recognizes Airbons' name as a known fanatical exile from Miami, but Casavares is an unknown entity. According to his driver's license, Casavares lives in New Jersey. Agent Menapace visits his apartment complex to talk to his neighbors, who tell him Casavares recently moved to Miami. Menapace plays a tape of the suspect's voice for the neighbors, and they identify the mysterious man, the voice of Omega-7, as Antonio Casavares. It's a huge break in the case. The task force immediately gets a subpoena for Casavares' phone records and begins to analyze his call history. From the phone records, the FBI identifies 3 other likely members of Omega-7. They analyze the credit card records of all 4 suspects, discovering several automobile rentals. The car rentals become a key piece of evidence, as some of the suspects had rented cars at Newark Airport just before the bombings and could have used them in the crimes. One man stands out, Eduardo Arocena. He had received a parking ticket across the street from the Cuban mission the same day that Omega-7 gunned down the Cuban attaché. On September 11, 1981, a bomb explodes at the Mexican consulate in Miami. Hours later, another bomb detonates at the Mexican consulate in Manhattan. Omega-7 claims credit for both attacks. Agent Menepace believes it's possible that a single person placed both bombs, as there was enough time to fly between Florida and New York to carry out the bombings. Menepace rushes to Newark Airport to check the records of rental car agencies. At the very last company, an employee recognizes one of the suspects' photos. Eduardo Arocena had just traded in his rental car for a new one, claiming the brakes were bad. The car he returned, potentially used in the bombings, is still at the curb. Agent Menepace knows it's a huge break. He has the car Arocena likely used in the bombings, and the suspect is currently renting another vehicle. Time is of the essence, as the FBI must stop Omega-7 before they strike again. When Arocena returns the second rental car, agents are waiting for him. He's surrounded by FBI agents disguised as customers and rental car employees. However, with only circumstantial evidence, they decide to surveil him rather than make an arrest. Agent Menepace follows the suspect on a shuttle bus to the terminal, staying as close as possible without compromising the surveillance. Menepace watches as Arocena gets in line to buy a ticket, using a false name to purchase a one-way ticket to Miami. The agent rushes to notify the FBI field office in Miami. In Miami, FBI agents follow the suspect from the airport through the narrow streets of Little Havana and eventually to his house. The Miami field office obtains a warrant to wiretap Arocena's phone. For a year, agents listen to the wiretap but hear nothing that connects Arocena with Omega-7. They continue looking for any thread, any piece of information that will allow them to go from theory to reality and identify the key actors. On September 2, 1982, at the federal courthouse in New York City, prosecutors subpoena all Omega-7 suspects to appear before a federal grand jury. The FBI needs their statements on record before the statute of limitations runs out. With an ulterior motive and knowing that Omega-7 is split into two rival factions, the FBI devises a scheme to pit one against the other. Agents arrange for the two factions to be in court on the same day. They watch as both groups meet in the hallway, observing evident friction and animosity between them. The FBI wants each faction to worry that the other may be cooperating against them. Most of the suspects assert their Fifth Amendment rights and refuse to testify. Only Eduardo Arocena takes the stand, denying everything. After the grand jury confrontation, Agent Wack returns to his office to find a message from Eduardo Arocena. Agent Wack returns the call immediately, and Arocena expresses a desire to meet and talk. A few days later, Agent Wack and an NYPD detective meet Eduardo Arocena at a hotel in Newark. Arocena tells them that he's come to negotiate with the FBI on behalf of Omega-7's leader, Omar. He says Omar is concerned that the FBI is getting close, not just in New York but in Miami, Newark and elsewhere. Arocena offers to tell them all about the crimes committed by the other faction, but only if the FBI promises to leave Omar's faction alone. Agent Wack asks to meet Omar in person, but Arocena says it's impossible. They agree to meet again the next day. At the second meeting, investigators confront Arocena about Omar's existence, suspecting that Arocena himself is Omar. They read him his Miranda rights. Arocena begins talking about the criminal activities of his rival faction, identifying names of the people who planted bombs. He reveals that the rival faction has more than a quarter ton of explosives hidden away for future attacks. Arocena offers to return to Miami to help them find the explosives, hoping to work out a deal with the FBI. However, in damning his former comrades, Arocena reveals that he is Omega-7's primary bomb maker. He admits to being the one who decided who dies, who gets bombed, and how they carry out their operations. The FBI now faces a major dilemma. Arocena is a confessed terrorist. They can either arrest him or take him back to Miami to find the explosives. The decision rises through the ranks of the FBI and the Department of Justice, ultimately reaching the director of the FBI. The director declares that saving lives is paramount, and they should send Eduardo Arocena back to Miami to locate the explosives. Arocena flies back to Miami, with his FBI handlers traveling on a separate flight to avoid compromising his cover. For 4 days, the informant contacts the FBI to brief agents on his hunt for the explosives. Then, on the 5th day, Aracina's demeanor changes during a call. He starts wavering about whether he can continue cooperating. Agent Wack encourages him to keep trying and to call back that afternoon.